Hey everyone, it's Lambomang here and welcome to the ultimate VR streaming and recording setup guide. Today I'm going to walk you through the setup that I use for recording SteamVR games. This is what I use for recording on the Valve Index, but it'll work with pretty much any VR headset, whether it's a Vive, a Rift, or a Windows Mixed Reality headset. Anything that SteamVR supports, which is pretty much every headset, will work with this setup. We're not going to cover Rift exclusive titles, capturing those because the whole Rift side of the fence is a little bit different and I'm a little bit out of the loop with that. So this is just going to be SteamVR side, how to capture SteamVR games, which is most VR games. So that's what we're going to be covering today. So let's start by talking about hardware. First thing you're going to need, obviously, is a VR headset. If you don't have one of those, why are you here? Second most important thing is a microphone. Now, most VR headsets have a microphone built into them, and most of them are garbage. You don't want to use them. They're okay for voice chat and games, but for streaming or recording, you're going to want something a whole lot better. That is, unless you're using the Valve Index. It has a pretty decent microphone in it, and I just use that one for my videos. But if you're using any other VR headset, I did a video a few months back comparing different microphone options for VR streaming. Definitely check that out. I recommend the Mod Mic 5 or the Mod Mic Wireless. That video will cover built-in microphones, mod mics, lapels with audio samples for everything. So if you're in the market for a mic, that's a very good comparison video. I'll leave a link to that down below. Camera. It's not entirely necessary. It's a stylistic thing, you know, whether you want a face cam or in the case of VR, it's more of a room cam than a face cam. But the one that I'm using here is a Panasonic GH4, just a little bit overkill for streaming. And that's running into an Elgato HD60 Pro, which is a capture card that slides into a PCI slot in your computer. But the most important part is the lens, because when you're doing a room view, a room cam, you want to have a pretty wide lens, pretty wide field of view, so you can capture everything that's going on. So the lens that I'm using is a full frame equivalent of a 28mm lens. So if you know your focal lengths, what you want is something in between 20 to 30, which is usually wide enough to capture like a nice room like this. Right now we're on like a 50mm equivalent, which is what I use when I'm sitting down, but when I'm capturing the whole room, you want that to be very wide. But if you're just using a desktop webcam, something like a Logitech C920, those usually have a pretty wide field of view anyway. The last piece of hardware that I would recommend is one of these little Elgato Stream Decks. This thing's pretty handy if you just like sit it on the edge of your desk, then you can just like walk over, feel the pad with your fingers and press the buttons. It's a lot easier to use with a headset on than trying to use your keyboard and mouse. So it's not entirely necessary, but it does make life easier. Although what would make life even easier is if they had a wireless one you could mount on your arm. That'd be pretty cool. So hardware wise, it's pretty much everything you need. So let's switch over and talk about software. So you'll need a few different pieces of software, which I'll go over quickly. Firstly, you're going to want OBS. Now this is what I use to record all my gameplay because it has a plugin, which we'll cover next, which is very important for capturing VR. And that is OpenVR Capture Plugin for OBS. What this plugin does is that instead of capturing the game window, you're going to be capturing the image being sent directly to your headset. Because the game window on your desktop is not always the best window to capture for VR gameplay. Sometimes it'll show like the left eye, like Pavlov only shows the left eye. You can't get the right eye view, which if you're right-handed, it means you can't get a nice view of you aiming down your sights properly. So if you want to capture the right eye, you're going to need this plugin. If you're playing something else like Skyrim VR, its desktop window is very distorted, so you can't get a good capture off of that. You'll need this plugin for that as well. So for the majority of games, this plugin is going to work better than capturing the desktop window. And then the last piece of software that you'll need, which is more for if you're streaming. If you're recording, you won't really need this, but you'll want OVR Toolkit, which is a program for taking desktop windows and making them visible in VR. So this way you can actually have your Twitch chat or your Mixer or YouTube chat, whatever platform you're on. You can have that in its own little floating window, maybe mount it to your hand, and then you can read your chat while you're playing inside of VR. So it's a pretty vital piece of software. It is, however, you do actually have to buy it. I think it's like 10 US, it's like 16 Australian. I haven't found any good free equivalents, so it's a little bit you have to pay up, but it's not that expensive, and it's more than worth the cost. So let's go about setting all these up one by one. Let's start with OBS. So, like I was saying before, normally you would just go and do like a game capture and then capture the desktop window. We don't want to do that. We want to get the image to the headset itself. So, let's go ahead and install the plugin. So that helps. I almost forgot to do that. So let's just go ahead and extract this quickly. And you'll be given this folder with these two folders and a README, which is not really that vital. So, where you're going to be installing this plugin is under wherever OBS is installed, which by default is usually like local disk C, program files, OBS Studio. And so under here, all we're going to do is we're going to take these two folders and drag them on over. And I've already installed the plugin before, so I'll just be replacing the files. Continue. It'd also help if I closed OBS. Don't try to do this while OBS is open. Okay, there we go. Plugin's installed. So if we go and relaunch OBS, now, if we go to add a source, we'll have OpenVR Capture. And then if we just go and add that on in, yeah, we'll just keep the default name for now. But we now have the image being sent directly to the headset. So if I move my headset around, yeah, there we go. So we have a few options to play around with here, which I'll cover. First, we've got capture right eye. You can untick that to capture the left eye. So if you're left-handed and you're trying to play Pavlov, you might want to capture the left eye so you get your sights and everything lined up. If you're right-handed, you'll probably want the right eye to get everything lined up. So now that we've got to do that, actually, I should probably launch a game in the background. You can see we've got this nice big square image. However, when you launch a game, that'll kind of be masked to match the shape of the lens. So let's go and open up Pavlov. Okay, so now we've got Pavlov open. And as you can see, it has masked the image to fit the shape of the lens. So we can't just take this image straight like this. We actually have to crop it so we get something usable. Now, if you are on a Vive, the plugin does have cropping presets for the Vive. However, because I'm on the Index, that's not going to work for me. You can still see the black bars and everything. So let's go back to no cropping, or none. Now we've got sliders down here, which will adjust the cropping. However, these aren't quite that easy to work with, because you want to crop it, but you also want to keep it at like an aspect ratio of like 16:9 or whatever. Whatever your standard 1080p video is, whatever aspect ratio you're using. So these sliders are not the easiest way to do that. So let's get rid of those. What we're going to do instead is we're just going to drag this around and we're just going to resize it in OBS. So let's try to get a good size. Probably make it a bit less zoomed in. As you can see, this is looking pretty good already. That's looking pretty good there. You just want to keep an eye out for the little black parts over here. Just want to make sure all of those are hidden. And then once you've got that in place, just go ahead and lock it so you can no longer accidentally drag it or anything. And you're pretty much set up for recording VR in OBS. Nice. Actually, let's throw up the desktop capture for Pavlov, just so you can see the difference. So let's go game capture, capture specific window, that window being Pavlov. Okay, so there we go. There's the Pavlov game capture, and there's our game capture. See, ours is actually capturing slightly higher than Pavlov is. What if we lower this? I think it's also slightly zoomed out. So we got a little bit more field of view to play with. We got a lot more field of view to play with, yeah. And obviously we're capturing the right eye instead of the left eye. So that's pretty much that. Now if we were to just go ahead and open this, switch this over to the left eye, same kind of thing. Just drag that into position. Scale it as necessary. And there you go. There's a few little side effects that I need to mention though of recording this way. And the first is that because this is exactly what's being sent to your headset, any VR overlays you have, like the Twitch chat stuff we'll cover in a second, that'll appear in your capture as well. Whereas if you were just capturing the game window itself, it would just be the game, none of your Twitch chat or anything. The other thing is that it will capture your SteamVR boundaries. Like you can see that red line there, which I'll show you how to make that a little bit better. So let me go over to my SteamVR settings, play area. Let's just put this back to the defaults, which is like beginner. If I move my headset around, where is it? There we go. You can see like the red walls that'll appear. I mean, I think it's blue by default, but I have mine set to blue. Red, I mean. I have mine set to red. And so you may not want that in your video, which unfortunately you can't get rid of it. All you can do is set this back over here to floor only. Always show floor bounds off. So it'll still show up when you get close to the edge of your play space. It'll just be this little, well, make sure you guys can see it. It'll just be this little red line on the ground. So that's how I do it, but make sure you're familiar with your play space. I'm pretty familiar with moving around in VR, so I know where my play space is. If you're playing something like Blade and Sorcery or Gorn, you may need those wall bounds because you probably will swing around wildly and smack into something, especially if you've got a smaller space. My space is pretty large, so I can have the bounds turned off completely, and I don't have to worry about hitting anything. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But even with that issue, it is still by far the best way to capture VR. As I said earlier, sometimes VR games, their desktop windows don't play that nicely for capturing. They're probably distorted, or they're only showing the left eye. This OpenVR capture plugin is going to work for the majority of VR games. There might be a few that have like fancy spectator camera features where you're better off capturing the game window, but most of the time, this plugin is how you're going to want to do it. Now, there are a few things that you'll need to do if you're using this plugin with the Valve Index. There's a few like more advanced features to like increase the field of view, make sure your hands are centered properly. However, that's a topic for a completely different video because that's a lot to get into. But that video will be going up tomorrow. So if you have a Valve Index and you want to know more about that, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell button. You'll get notified as soon as that goes up because it's a whole other topic on its own, and we can do some really cool stuff with the extra field of view in that headset. But now that you have your VR being captured in OBS, you can go ahead and like add in your overlays, whatever you've got set up, and that's all good to go. So let's talk about, where is it? OVR Toolkit. And I'll walk you through how to get this set up so that you can see your Twitch chat or your stream chat inside of VR. So here we are, OVR Toolkit. There's not that much you can change on the desktop itself, aside from your language. So just make sure that that's set properly. And then we'll go ahead and jump into the headset. And that's where all the fun happens. That's where the magic goes on. Okay, so now we're in the headset. You may notice there's not much to see first, but you can see this little like dashboard thing, which will tell you the time and also how much battery life your controllers have got. So that's pretty handy to have. So to get started with this program, what you want to do is you want to double press your grips at the same time. So 1, 2, there we go. OVR Toolkit. So now that we're here, we can go ahead and let's spawn a new window. Oh, there we go. There's my my main desktop capture. So with this program, I can either capture my entire desktop, like any of my monitors, or I can capture a specific window. So let's go ahead. Let's open the window settings, this one, and we want to go switch window. This will give us a list of like all the different programs I've got open. And with this, you can usually capture like, you go to your Twitch page, whatever, and pop out the chat into its own window. And then you can capture that window. Or you can use a dedicated desktop program like Streamlabs Chatbot, which is what I use. And let me just go switch to that. Now this program shows me my chat. It has bot commands built into it that I can customize. Yeah, it's pretty handy to have. So I would definitely recommend checking this out. It's not necessary. Like I said, you can just pop out your chat window from your browser and capture that instead. But now we have our Twitch chat inside of VR. Now, this may not be the best place to have it right in front of you, so let's go ahead and move this. And that's pretty simple as well. All you gotta do is reach out, grab it, and then place it wherever you want. So there's two places that I usually see chat windows put for VR, and I'll show you how to set it up for both of them. First one we're going to cover is having a chat snap to your hand. So if I just grab this, drop window here to attach to hand, there we go. Now it'll just follow my hand around. Now let me just move that over this way a bit further. We've got some options here. We'll want to make this smaller. Want to make it small so it doesn't take up all your view, but you still want to be able to read your chat. On a headset like the Index or the Rift S, you can drop this down a bit because they have a pretty good resolution. Something like the Vive you got to be careful with because its resolution is a little bit lower. But let me go ahead and set this up where I usually set up my chat, which is something like that. So I have my chat over on the back of my hand because then I can be playing with my guns, running around shooting, and it's not going to be in the way. But as soon as I want to check chat, boom, there's my chat. And away it goes again. So that's personally my favorite place to have chat set up. There's just a few more options you got to tweak in here. Let's block the cursor input so I can't accidentally click on anything. If you do want to be able to click on your little window, make sure you've got block cursor input disabled. You'll also need to pin the window as well, because when I go ahead and close this by double tapping the grips again, oops, there we go, it's still going to be there. There's a few other settings as well, which is the opacity. I'll usually lower that to like 60% or something. Oh, let's go a bit higher. Let's try 75. So I can still read chat, but I can see through. It's not completely blocking my vision. I'll drop the frame rate down to 5. I don't need my chat window captured at 60 frames per second. 5 is more than enough for text. And then under visibility, we've got this nice little feature called hide when not looking at the window. So what that'll do now is that it'll stay invisible until I actually look at it. Then it'll fade in, it'll fade out. It's a nice little way of making sure that it doesn't show up on your capture unless you actually want to look at it. So once you've got all that set up, that's how I do my chat for VR. So that's how I do things, but I'll show you how to set up the way I see a lot of other people do it as well. Oh, sounds like a bit of thunder outside. Wait, that means my clothes are on the line. Hold up, my clothes are getting wet. Alright, I'm back. Where was I? That's right, I was going to show the other place to set up Twitch chat. So yeah, we got it on the hand. However, this is something that I see a lot of Beat Saber or Rhythm VR gamers do, which is where, instead of being on your hand, they'll have that chat up in the sky. So, let's go and set that up very quickly. Let's go ahead and spawn a new window, open up some settings, select that window, switch it back to my chat, and then, this time, let's see. Let's just go and make sure that the input is blocked. Window is pinned. We'll decrease, no, we'll keep it at 75%. 5 frames per second. We want to make this one bigger. Like that'll probably do. So this time, we can just like reach over and grab it, but you can also, if you stand back a little bit, point at the window and hold down your grip button, you can move it like that. So that way you can use that to get it further out of your play space to about there. Again, make sure you can read the chat, make sure the text is visible. And so now, if you're playing Beat Saber, you can just glance up, read the chat, and go back to smashing block. And then I'll also go ahead and turn the hide when not looking at window on again. So now it's gone, it's not in your view, it's not in your gameplay footage. Bam, there it is. So that is how to set up your chat for VR streaming. One last thing that I want to touch on before we end the video is I'll just very quickly go over my settings inside of OBS, my quality settings. So let's start by going to video. Resolution wise, I capture at 1920 by 1080, but for streaming to Twitch, I actually downscale this to 1600 by 900, also known as 900p. So the reason I do this is because the more resolution you have, the less quality your video is going to be. It may not make sense when you say it out loud like that, but you've only got a limited amount of bit rate, a limited amount of bandwidth you can stream to Twitch with, which is about 6 megabits per second is what I stream with. So if you've got a higher resolution, you're trying to fit more pixels into that 6 megabits per second. So I put this down to 900 because that means that I can have fast moving scenes without the video getting all blocky and muddy looking. But I've still got some resolution and I've got quality. So I find that as a nice trade-off between 720p and 1080p. Just put it down to 900p. The actual video settings I use for streaming and recording are pretty much straight from the NVIDIA Encoder OBS guide. So I'll leave a link to this as well as the input plugin. Links for everything are going to be in the description. And I'm basically using the settings that they recommend on here with a few slight changes. So streaming settings are pretty much the same. 6000 kilobits per second is my upload. Recording wise, I'll chuck this onto constant bitrate and put that at 24,000 kilobits per second. And that is usually pretty good quality without being overly large file sizes. So yeah, that's what I use for recording. That's what I use for streaming. And that all works out pretty well for me. And that's pretty much it. That's my setup for recording VR gameplay. It's not really that complicated. You just gotta know the right tools, how to set it up properly. And then once you've got all of this, like I said, you just go ahead, add your overlays, your alerts, whatever, as you would normally, and then you're all good to go. But as I said earlier in the video, I do have a little bit more of an advanced setup for my index, so I will be covering that in a video tomorrow, so make sure you have your notifications on for that. We're going to do some pretty cool stuff. We're going to be working on like increasing the field of view, making sure hands are lined up properly. It's going to look pretty awesome, but if you're on a Rift and a Vive, this is all you need to do. This is all you need to get started, and yeah. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you found it pretty informative, pretty helpful. Go forth and make your own VR content. I am really keen to see the industry grow, and I will see you all in the next one.